How come carb addiction isn't considered a real thing in most places, where all the other addictions are talked about and recognized, some of them as diseases? There are organizations and associations and programs: Alcoholics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, drug treatment programs, rehab centers. All of these things exist for addicted people. Yet, for some reason, carbohydrate addiction, in my opinion, the granddaddy of all addictions, is in so many circles not even considered a real thing. And that was the first thing that really piqued my interest when I discovered that I was a slave to this addiction. Everybody I knew was a slave to this addiction. We were finding out more and more and more about the dangers and diseases and chronic conditions caused by the overconsumption of these substances. And the reason for this overconsumption, is the fact that people can't stop eating of it, which is, at its base, the definition of what addiction means. No control, no conscious ability to stop. And yet, where's that carb addiction treatment center? Oh, there's drugs, but nobody calls it what it is. Nobody calls it what it is. And I think it's about time that we start. We've tried many times before. I'm very careful to point out that I'm not arrogant enough to claim that I'm the first person that ever thought that all of these problems, well, maybe we're addicted to sugar. Carb addiction has been talked about for years and years and years. Any concept, any new theory evolves. And my understanding of carb addiction has evolved for 30 or 40 years when I discovered I was helpless to keep from binging on these things, always trying to lose weight. I'm certainly not the first person to talk about this, and yet why is it there's not a really easily understandable explanation of it and solution? I came out a couple of years ago with a carb addiction test, and I claimed I'm definitely not the first person to have ever come up with a carb addiction test. I came up with my own version of the test. They're all pretty similar. Basically, one question would be sufficient. Can you stop eating this crap once you start eating it? Yes or no? You're an addict, you're not an addict. But in watching how the whole community has evolved over years and years, especially the carnivore community in the last 8 years, many pieces of the puzzle start to come together. Early on, I remember seeing this. This is 7 years ago. 7 years ago. It's titled, Am I Addicted to Sugar Quiz? Dr. Jen Unwin. And she has like an 11-question quiz. I'll put a link to this video in the description here. You can watch it if you want. It may get you start to thinking along these lines, or convince you that these are the lines you should be thinking on. How come we don't hear too much from Jen Unwin, how come this never got the legs that the carnivore diet got? Great questions. How come there's no interest in this video? Look down here, right there. 1.9 thousand views in 7 years and 44 thumbs up. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about the root cause of what is killing the human race and responsible for all of the problems we have. Nobody cares. They care if they can make money and sell you something that you will think will help you, but we're not talking about the problem the way it is. So the next thing I want you to understand is my theory on why. How come this never gets legs? How come this never takes off? How come other things just become trends and fads? Wild things, ridiculously stupid things, but they become trends and fads nonetheless. There's certain forces at work that don't want us to discover that the stuff they're selling us is killing us. I don't have to tell you who they are. The food and the drug companies. They don't want anything to change. In Dr. Owen's video, she talked about the reluctance of anybody in the medical or science community to even acknowledge that carbohydrate addiction is actually a real thing. And she cited some studies. And you can watch the video if you want. And in those studies, she said the conclusions always came up that it's just not a real thing and just a weakness. And when you dig into these studies, like most studies, you find out that they're a fraud. And she found out that some organization that funded these studies was affiliated with the Corn Growers Association. Well, duh. But that's not the biggest problem. Not the reluctance of anyone in scientific or medical community to actually admit that this is a problem. It will only cost them money if you learn that lesson. You stop buying their junk food. You stop buying their harmful drugs. You might even, if enough people were doing what I'm doing, try to come up with some way to actually tame this beast, get it under control. And we're going to talk an awful lot in the future about why you're addicted, where it came from. Nothing just, poof, appears out of nowhere. But that's not the biggest problem. The propaganda against accepting the fact that carbohydrate addiction is a real thing, even though more and more people keep talking about it, they still don't tell you how to handle it, how to overcome it. And we're going to do that. But I think the correct answer to that requires this theory of a spectrum of how different people in different places on the spectrum can handle it or have to handle it. We talked about that yesterday in the intro. The biggest obstacle, and this is ironic. Sit down, pay attention, put down the cell phone. Remember what I'm going to tell you right now. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember this. The biggest obstacle, the biggest reason why this particular addiction cannot gain any traction is you and me. Whoa, what are you talking about, Mitch? It's not my fault. Not consciously, it's not. Your animal brain is driving your addiction for a reason. It thinks. Well, it actually doesn't even think. It is programmed to react as though you can't live without this substance you're addicted to. Your very survival is at stake if you don't get these carbohydrates into you, because of the role that they played in our species' survival eons and eons ago. That programming still runs our computer. Our conscious mind has very little control over the subconscious, and that was the concept of my book, Taming the Beast Within. The biggest reason that this has never gained traction is because addicts don't want to fix their addiction. They're addicted because that's the major source of pleasure in their life. Ask an addict. I use alcoholism as an example. Ask an addict, are you an alcoholic? 99 out of 100 times, an alcoholic's going to tell you, no, I'm not addicted. I'm strong. I'm weak. I can control myself. I can stop drinking anytime I want. And you say, well, why don't you stop your drinking? I don't want to. They don't care. It's so strong that the damage they're doing to themselves doesn't matter. They're not willing to give it up. Drug addiction, the same way. Well, it's even stronger with the sugar addiction because you've got ancient evolutionary reasons and programming that ensure the survival of the human race when there wasn't a 7-Eleven on every corner. Hardwired into our genetics and epigenetics, making sure that if our animal brain thinks we're going to be dead tomorrow because sugar is running out, it will give us urges and drive so strong that we lose our conscious ability to control ourselves. And the major test of if you're a carb addict is the ability to be honest with yourself and say, have I ever been in a situation where I lost control, was unable to not eat that addictive substance, and was able to rationalize it with some lame excuse or promise, but did it anyway, and then afterwards regretted it, felt ashamed of myself, and promised to never do it again like I have 100 times before? That's you. You're an addict. Plain and simple. How much of an addict? That's what we're here to figure out, a method to quantify just where from 0 to 100 you fall, and that will dictate the, quote, prescription of the lifestyle that you can enjoy and tolerate with little damage to your health, but still allowing you to have pleasure that maybe somebody who's addicted more than you has to give up and abstain completely. We talked about listening to people that are on a different spectrum than you are and following their advice that they do for themselves. Doesn't work. We need to talk about this spectrum. It's talked about everywhere else, especially in the prescription of drugs. Can't give the same drug to everybody. The biggest reason that this concept has never, and the concept of carbohydrate addiction has not gone anywhere, is because we cannot admit to ourselves that it's even real. How do we expect anybody else to take it seriously when we can't admit it to ourselves? Don't believe me? Just ask an addict if he's an addict. And those people that finally do realize and admit these weaknesses to themselves are the only ones that can ever fix it. The rest of them are out there in denial, like all those people who drink too much alcohol, who wouldn't dare admit to you that they're alcoholics. That's the reason why nobody thinks about carbohydrate addiction in any serious manner as a problem we need to fix. In reality, it's probably the first problem we need to fix. It's the problem that is at the root cause of all of our other health problems. It's the Mac Daddy of problems. So let's sum up. Chapter 2. Yes, carbohydrate addiction is a problem. It's a huge problem, but it's in most people's interests, both business and self-interests, to ignore it, not accept that it's real. It allows the food and drug companies to make fortunes, and it allows you and I to blissfully enjoy the pleasures that we get from eating so much sugar. We don't want it to be real. They don't want it to be real. Nobody wants it to be real. It's not real. It's just not real. If you're going to fix it, you have to at least acknowledge that it's a problem. Great place to start. I'll just have to assume that those of you that keep coming back to hear about how we fix it actually have gotten past chapter 2, either from your own experience or your guts and courage to admit to yourself that you're not as strong and powerful and in control as you'd like to be. You accept the fact that it's impossible for us to have that control, but it's not impossible for us to be self-delusional. Sometimes you got to admit you're not as strong as you think. To believe that it's not your fault and stop punishing yourself for all this and accept the real root cause of it, because until that happens, no problem is ever fixed. Only the symptoms of those problems get treated, but eliminating the problem never happens. I hope to lead you through that. The whole concept is evolving itself. I get more and more insights and information every day. I got some between yesterday and today in correspondence and emails and comments from so many of you. All these things come together, and a theory never stops evolving, and the final answer is never set in stone. So for now, take the rest of the day off. Think about this. We'll talk more about it, and eat meat.